Somewhere, a long way from here, there is a stone. It was cut from a hillside once, by hands that are gone now. It was lifted and set into a wall and left to face the weather for 800 years. Tonight, we are going to walk toward it, slowly. There is no hurry at all. Welcome to Drift Through History, the place where the past comes to rest, and where you are allowed, at last, to rest with it. Tonight we are drifting into the age of castles, not the fairy tale kind, with banners always bright and knights forever polished. The real ones, the cold ones and the warm ones. The ones full of bread and smoke and sleeping dogs, and people not so very different from you. Over the next little while, we will follow 100 quiet facts about medieval castles, how they rose out of bare earth in a single week, who carried the stones, and who emptied the drains, what it felt like to fall asleep in a great hall with 40 other people breathing in the dark, how the walls were attacked, and how, more often than not, they simply waited. You do not need to remember any of it. That is not what this is for. If your eyes are already growing heavy, let them. The story will keep going without you, the way the castle kept standing long after its builders had gone to bed for the last time. If you enjoy these slow journeys, you are always welcome to follow along, so the next one can find you on some other quiet night. No need to do anything now, just settle in. Listen, before we begin, for two small sounds. Somewhere below, the long groan of iron chains as a drawbridge is lowered for the night, and somewhere above, a single bell in a chapel tower, marking an hour no one is awake to count. Hold those two sounds gently. We will hear them again. Now, let the blankets grow heavy, let the room grow dim, and let us walk toward that one gray stone, waiting in the dark, exactly where it has always been. Part 1. The First Stones. Let us begin with a simple question, the kind you can turn over slowly, without needing to answer. What, really, is a castle? We picture towers and flags, moats and drawbridges. But underneath all of that, a castle was something quieter and more human. It was a home you could close like a fist, a place where a family lived and ate and argued and slept, that also happened to be built so that no one could easily take it from them. Keep that in mind as we go. Every wall we walk past tonight was, to someone, simply the place they lived. The very word carries that smallness inside it. Castle comes from the Latin castellum, and castellum is a little word for a little thing. It is the diminutive of castrum, a Roman fort or camp. So castellum means, more or less, a little fort. Not an empire, not a fortress of legend, a little fort. There is something tender in that, when you think about it. The grandest ruins in Europe are named, at their root, for something modest. A small, safe place, a shelter with walls. The earliest of these were humbler still. They were made of earth and wood, in a shape called the motte and bailey. The motte was a mound, a raised hill of piled soil, with a wooden tower set on top. The bailey was the yard below it, a flat enclosed space ringed by a fence and a ditch, where the ordinary business of life went on. Down in the bailey, there were stables and workshops, chickens and dogs, the smell of wood smoke and animals. Up on the mound sat the tower, watching over all of it, a home on a hill with a fence around the farmyard. That is all it was, to begin with. And here is something that surprises people. The first castles were not made of stone at all. They were made of timber, because timber was cheap and quick and everywhere. You did not need a quarry, or a master mason, or a decade of money. You needed trees, and men with axes, and a little time. A lord could raise one of these in a season, sometimes far less, and suddenly hold a piece of country he had not held the week before. Stone came later, and slowly. Wood came first. Just how quickly could they rise? A chronicler writing not long after the Norman conquest claimed that the castle at Dover was thrown up in only 8 days. 8 days. It is easy to imagine the noise of it, the constant scrape of shovels, the shouting, the raw earth turning darker as it was heaped higher. We should be a little careful with that number, the way we are careful with any boast written to flatter a king. But even if it stretched to a few weeks, the point holds. A hill that had never been there before could appear in the time it takes the moon to barely change, which raises a quieter question. How much earth does a hill like that actually take? More than you might think. When researchers studied the motte at a place called Hampstead Marshall, they found it held over 22,000 tons of soil. 22,000 tons, moved by hand, in baskets and barrows, one load at a time. And it was not simply dumped in a heap. The earth was laid down in careful layers, and between the layers they set stone, partly to bind it, partly to let the rain drain away so the mound would not slump into mud. A hill built like a cake, in patient bands, by people who never saw a machine in their lives. When you stand on one of these mounds today, you are standing on the shoulders of enormous, forgotten labor, and the land was covered in them. In England and Wales alone, historians count somewhere around 700 of these motte and bailey castles, most of them raised in a single furious generation after 1066. Imagine that, a whole country, within about 20 years, suddenly studded with man-made hills, each one a new lord looking out over fields that had just changed hands. You could hardly travel a day, in some regions, without seeing one rising on the horizon, pale and raw and new. But wood does not last, and everyone knew it. Timber rots in the wet. Timber burns. A wooden tower was a fine thing to seize a country with, and a poor thing to hold it with. So, in time, the order came down, from kings and great lords, to build again in stone. And this is where our journey truly begins, because somewhere in those years, a mason set his tools against a block of rough gray rock, and cut the very first stone of a wall that would outlive everyone he ever knew. We will follow that stone all the way through the night. Right now, it is only a shape in the quarry. Remember it. Here is the gentle turn, though. For all the effort poured into that stone, it is often the earth that survived, not the walls. Across the countryside, hundreds of these old mottes still stand, but the wooden towers that once crowned them are entirely gone. Not a splinter left. What remains is the mound itself, soft now, green with grass, worn round at the edges like a word repeated too many times. The mightiest part, the tower, vanished. The humblest part, a pile of dirt, endured. And so, tonight, in some quiet field, one of these hills is sleeping under the stars. There may be sheep on it, or a single tree, or nothing at all but the wind moving through the grass. A dog walker might pass it tomorrow and never guess that a fortress once stood there, that people were born and died on that small rise, that it was the center of someone's whole world. The shape is still there, waiting, keeping its secret, and far off, in the dark, that first gray stone is waiting too, not yet lifted, not yet set. We will come to it, but not yet. There is no hurry at all. Part 2. Walls within walls. If the first castles were hills of earth, the ones we picture in our dreams were something else entirely. They were stone made into a shape that could think. Every wall, every tower, every narrow slit had a reason, worked out by people who had learned their lessons the hard way, in blood and hunger. Tonight we walk slowly through that thinking, not to study it, but to feel it, the way you feel the logic of a house you grew up in, without ever putting it into words. At the heart of it stood the keep. In England they often called it that, plain and blunt, though the French had a grander word, the donjon. This was the strongest single building in the whole castle, the tallest tower, the thickest walls, the place you went when everything else was lost. If attackers poured over the outer defenses, the family and the last of the garrison could retreat here and hold on, sometimes for weeks. It was a castle inside the castle, a final room at the center of everything, built on the simple, ancient idea that no matter how bad things become, there should always be one more door to close behind you. Around that heart ran the curtain wall. It is a soft name for a hard thing. The curtain was the great outer ring of stone that enclosed the whole site, and it was built to be pounded and to not care. At Windsor, in places, these walls were made some 7 feet thick, 7 feet of solid stone between the inside and the world. Stand close to a wall like that and press your hand against it, and you feel how cool it stays even in summer, how it drinks the heat out of your palm. That coolness is the same coolness the defenders felt, leaning against it in the dark, listening. A wall thick enough to lean your whole life against. Then came an idea so good, it changed everything. Instead of one wall, why not 2? An outer ring, lower, and an inner ring, higher, set just behind it. This was the concentric castle, and its nickname says it best: walls within walls. An attacker who fought his way over the outer wall did not find safety. He found himself trapped in a narrow killing space between the two, with defenders on the higher inner wall, looking calmly down on him from above. It was defense in layers, like the rings of an onion, and it made a castle almost impossible to storm. You could win, and win again, and still be losing. The towers changed shape too, and the reason is beautiful in its cleverness. The oldest towers were square, but a square tower has corners, and a corner is a weakness. A besieger's miners could attack that single vulnerable angle, and the flat faces gave a battering engine a perfect place to aim, so the builders rounded them off. A round tower has no corner to break, and its curved face causes stones and blows to glance away rather than land square. One of the earliest and finest examples was built in France by Richard the Lionheart at a castle called Chateau Gaillard, and we will return to that place before the night is through, for its ending is a strange one. Now look closely at the walls, and you will see them pierced by thin vertical slits. These were the arrow loops, and they were a small marvel. From the outside, each was a mere sliver, a slot barely wide enough to fear. But inside, the opening splayed out wide, giving an archer room to stand, to shift, to sweep his aim across a huge arc of ground, while almost nothing of him could be touched. He could see everything. The enemy could see a line of shadow. It is the whole idea of a castle in miniature. Give little away. Watch everything. Stay safe in the dark, and let the danger stay outside, in the light. But here is a subtler thing, the kind only the walls themselves could teach. Over time, the builders began moving those slits higher up. The the lower ones grew rarer, and the reason was not what you would guess. A long slit low in a wall quietly advertised where the stone was thinnest, and enemy miners learned to read them, digging their tunnels between two slits to bring down the whole stretch above. So the masons left the base solid and blind, and pushed the shooting positions up toward the crest instead. The wall learned to keep even its own weaknesses a secret. There is a lesson in that, somewhere, for another night. High above, the crest itself held one more trick, called machicolation. Picture a stone gallery that juts out slightly beyond the top of the wall, with gaps in its floor. Through those gaps, a defender could reach the dead ground at the very foot of the wall, the one place an attacker huddling against the base had thought himself safe. This idea, it seems, came home from the Crusades, carried back from the great fortresses of the East, along with silk and spices and new words. War, like everything else, travels and borrows and learns. Even a hole in a stone floor can be a thing brought back from far away. And where the gate passage ran through the wall, they built the cruelest gap of all, the murder hole. It was an opening in the ceiling of the entrance tunnel, above the heads of anyone who forced their way in. The very name in English, murder hole, sounds like something from a nightmare, yet its true history is tangled. Writers have long confused its name with an old French word that actually meant the arrow slit, something else entirely, so that even scholars argue over what to call it. A hole with a fearsome name and a mistaken identity. Long ago, far away, there is no need for fear here, only the quiet interest of it. Which brings us, at last, up the stairs. In the great towers, you climbed by a spiral staircase, winding up through the stone. And you have almost certainly been told the famous reason for its twist, that it spirals clockwise, so a right-handed defender fighting his way down had room to swing his sword, while the attacker climbing up did not. It is a wonderful story. It is also almost certainly untrue. Careful surveys have found dozens upon dozens of staircases winding the other way, in the mightiest castles of all, built in the fiercest years. The real reason for the twist is simply lost. Perhaps it was for balance, perhaps for carrying goods, perhaps for nothing more than the habit of a right-handed mason. We do not know. And so we arrive, gently, at the top of that stair, where the truth about the staircase runs out, and only the quiet remains. There, set into the thick wall of the topmost room, is a small stone shelf, a little niche worn smooth. On it, someone has placed a candle. Its flame leans and steadies in the draught from the narrow window, throwing a soft, moving light across stone that was cut and lifted and set by hands long gone. From the courtyard far below, that single lit window is the only warm thing in all that cold gray mass. A little light kept high in the dark for no one in particular. We will see it again too. For now, let it burn. Let your eyes close, and let us leave the stairs and the slits and the secret twists and drift on down into the warm heart of the hall. Part 3. Raising the Stone. We have walked past a great deal of stone tonight. The keep, the curtain wall, the towers, the slit windows. It is easy to let it all become scenery, a backdrop of gray. But every single block of it was lifted into place by a living person, with a name, and an aching back, and a home somewhere they were probably missing. So let us slow down here, and think not about the castle, but about the hands that made it. Because a castle was not really built by a king at all. It was built by an army. Not an army of soldiers, an army of workers, thousands strong, and tonight they deserve to be remembered. The first of them worked at the very edge of things, in the quarries. These were the men who wrestled the raw stone out of the earth, splitting it along its natural seams, breaking it down into blocks a cart could carry. And their labor did not stop when the weather turned. Through the whole of winter, they were kept on, breaking stone into smaller pieces to be burned into lime for the mortar that held everything together. Picture that: the short, cold days, the frost in the fingers, the endless dull ring of iron on rock, so that when spring came, there would be lime enough to build. The wall began long before the wall, out in the cold, in the sound of breaking stone. Then came the masons themselves, and they were of two kinds. There were the cutters, who shaped each block with chisel and mallet, and the layers, who set them true. This was skilled, patient, expensive work, and we know just how expensive because the old accounts survive. At one of the Welsh castles, a mason was paid a little over £8 to build 142 arrow slits. Think back to those narrow windows we passed, splayed wide on the inside for the archer. Each one was shaped by a man being counted and paid, one slit at a time. Somewhere, in a ledger 700 years old, is the price of the very window we were looking through. Above them all stood one man, the master mason, who was to the castle what a composer is to a symphony. For the great castles of Wales, this was a figure named James of St. George, summoned from far away in Savoy, near the mountains where France and Italy and Switzerland meet. He had built fortresses across Europe, and the king wanted the best, and the king paid for the best. James earned 3 shillings a day for life. To feel the weight of that, remember this: an ordinary skilled craftsman earned about that much for a whole week's work. James earned it in a day. A single, irreplaceable mind, worth more than the many hands he guided. And here is a small, quiet wonder, the kind that archaeologists still trace with their fingers today. On the stones of these castles, if you look carefully, you can find tiny carved symbols, a little cross, a crossed arrow, a shape like a rune. These are masons' marks, cut by individual masons into the blocks they had finished, most likely so their work could be counted and their wages paid. But they have become something more, because the same mark can turn up at different castles, in different years. Scholars can sometimes follow a single mason across his whole life, watching him move from one great work to the next, leaving his private signature in the stone. A man who never learned to write his name left it anyway, over and over, and we are still reading it 8 centuries later. Now let us feel the sheer size of the thing. At the castle of Beaumaris, in the busy heat of one summer, the master's own letters tell us that as many as 3,500 people were at work on the site at once. 3,500. 400 masons, 2,000 of the lesser workmen, 200 quarrymen, 30 smiths, and the carts and wagons and boats to feed them all with stone. It was not a building site. It was a small city that existed only to raise walls, humming from dawn to dusk, and then gone again when the season ended, leaving the silent stone behind. These thousands did not simply live nearby. They were gathered and conscripted and hired from across the whole of the kingdom, each region sending its own kind of skill. The ditch diggers came from the flat, wet counties in the east, men who knew how to move earth and water. The woodcutters came from the forests of the Midlands. The finest masons were brought from the far southern quarrying country. Imagine being one of them, a young man from a warm southern county, set down in the rain of a distant coast, among strangers speaking in accents he could barely follow, homesick, working stone under a gray sky. The castle rose out of a homesickness spread across 100 villages. And so, at last, we come to the stone, our stone. It had been cut in the quarry, and shaped by a cutter, and marked with his small private sign. Now it was loaded onto a cart, and carried, jolting, to the foot of the growing wall, perhaps part of its journey by boat along the coast. And there, with ropes and timber cranes and the shoulders of many men, it was lifted, up, and set at last into its place in the rising wall, bedded down in that hard-won lime mortar, one block among thousands. This was the moment. The stone we have been following since the first hour of the night finally left the ground and became part of the castle. It would not move again for 800 years. But the men who lifted it were not always paid. This is the part the legends leave out. In that same letter from Beaumaris, the master mason is not boasting. He is begging. The money has run out. The men's wages are badly in arrears, he writes, and he is having the greatest difficulty keeping them because they simply have nothing to live on. Read that again, slowly. The workers who built the most perfect castle in the land were, at that very moment, hungry, unpaid, and close to walking away. The master earned 3 shillings a day for life. The men who carried the stones were starving in the shadow of the wall they were raising. Both things are true. Both things were happening at once. Here is the gentlest truth of all, though, and it belongs at the end of a long day's work. Many of these people never saw the castle finished. The great ones took decades to build. Beaumaris, for all its perfection, was never entirely completed. Its outer towers and gates were meant to rise higher, and never did. So the men who broke the first stone had grown old, or died, long before the last stone was ever meant to be laid. They spent their whole working lives on a thing they would not see whole. And yet, look closely at almost any castle wall, and you will find rows of small square holes running along it. Those are the last marks of their scaffolding, the sockets where their wooden platforms once bit into the stone. The timber rotted away centuries ago. The little holes remain. It is nearly all that is left of them. The wall is finished now. The workers went home a long, long time ago. And somewhere behind that wall, the hall is warm, and the fire is lit, and we are going in. Part 4. The Hearth and the Hall. We have spent 3 parts out among the cold stones. Now, at last, let us go inside, into the one room where a castle stopped being a fortress and became a home. Every castle, however grand or grim, had a beating heart, and it was called the Great Hall. If you remember only one room from tonight, let it be this one, warm and loud and full of people, because for all the talk of war, this is where a castle mostly lived, not in battle, in the ordinary golden light of an evening meal. The Great Hall was the largest room in the castle, and it was almost everything at once. It was the dining room, where the lord ate at a raised table on a platform at one end. It was the courtroom, where disputes were settled. It was the meeting place, the audience chamber, the theater for feasts and music, and the telling of long tales. Business was done here, marriages were arranged here, justice was handed down here. A single room held nearly the whole public life of a community. When you picture a castle full of life, picture this hall, and picture it never empty, from before dawn until long after dark. And when the meal was over, and the fires burned low, that same hall became something else again. It became a bedroom. Most of the household, the servants and lesser folk, simply lay down and slept there, on straw mattresses spread across the floor, wrapped in whatever they had. Imagine it, a great dim room, the last of the firelight on the walls, and 40 or 50 people breathing in the dark, close together for warmth. There was very little privacy in a castle, almost none for ordinary people. But there was this, the simple animal comfort of not being alone in the night. A whole household, sleeping like one body in the glow of the banked fire. Keeping that hall warm was a constant, quiet battle, and their cleverest weapon was hanging on the walls. We think of tapestries as decoration, and they were beautiful, but their first purpose was warmth. A great woven cloth hung against bare stone traps a thin layer of air, and that layer of air holds back the cold that pours endlessly out of the walls. So those glowing scenes of hunts and gardens and saints were also, in truth, insulation, beauty doing the work of a blanket. When the draft moved through the hall, the tapestries stirred against the stone, and the painted deer and the woven forests seemed, very faintly, to breathe. Here is a thing that surprises almost everyone. For much of the age of castles, the fireplace as we know it, set into the wall with a chimney drawing the smoke up and away, did not yet exist. In the early halls, the fire simply burned in an open hearth in the middle of the floor, and the smoke was left to find its own way out, through a vent in the roof high above, drifting up through the whole room as it went. So the early great hall was often a smoky place, the upper air hazy, the smell of wood smoke soaked into everything. That comfort of a fire crackling neatly in the wall was a later gift. For a long time, warmth and smoke came together, and you simply learned to live inside the haze. For light, they had a small and lovely thing, set into the very stone of the walls. It was a little recess, a shallow niche, and it had a plain name, a lamp rest. Here you could set a candle, or a small oil lamp, so its glow spread out into the room without the draft snuffing it, and the quality of that light told you exactly where you stood in the world. The great could afford clean-burning beeswax candles, which smelled faintly of honey. Everyone else made do with tallow, rendered from animal fat, which smoked and guttered and smelled of the kitchen. High in a wall somewhere, in one of those little niches, our candle is still burning tonight, leaning in the draft, marking a window no one below is awake to see. Underfoot, the floors were strewn with rushes, gathered from the riverbanks. A fresh layer of these long dried reeds spread across the stone gave a little warmth, a little softness, and soaked up the endless mess of a crowded life, the spilled ale and the dropped food, and the mud carried in from the yard. Sometimes sweet herbs were scattered among them, so that a footstep released a faint green scent. It was not always as clean as we might wish. The old rushes were not always swept away as often as they should have been, but there is something homely in it. A floor you could refresh like a made bed, a room that could be made to smell of cut grass and herbs on a good day. And yet, for all this shared warmth, the Lord and his family did have one place of their own. Beyond the high end of the hall, up a small stair, lay a private chamber called the solar. Here, and almost nowhere else, was privacy. A room with a proper bed, curtained round to hold in the warmth and keep out the eyes of the world, with its own fireplace, its own quiet. To have a door you could close on the rest of the household was, in that age, a rare and precious luxury. Nearly everyone lived their whole life in shared rooms and shared beds, and shared sleep. To be alone was a privilege of the very few. Sit with that for a moment. How strange and how tender that privacy itself was once a kind of wealth. Here is something stranger still. For all their size, castles were often mostly empty. The lord and lady did not stay in one place. They moved from castle to castle, across their lands, and when they moved, they took nearly everything with them: the beds, the linen, the tapestries, the plates and cups and candlesticks, all packed into carts and carried to the next hall. So at any given time, most of the rooms in a castle stood shut up, cold and bare, the furniture gone, waiting. The household that lived there day to day was often quite small, a great stone giant of a building, with only a few rooms lit, and all the rest of it dark and empty and still, like a house where most of the family has gone away. And so we come to the end of the day inside those walls. The great meal is finished. The tables, which were often just boards on trestles, have been taken down and stacked against the wall. The rushes have been trodden flat. The fire in the middle of the floor has sunk to a deep red glow, and the smoke has thinned to almost nothing in the dark air above. One by one, the household lies down where they can, on the straw, near the warmth, close to one another. Up in the solar, a curtain is drawn around a bed, and high in the wall, in its little niche, the candle burns lower. Tomorrow there will be bread to bake and fires to build and water to carry. But that is tomorrow. For now the hall is quiet and full of sleeping people and warm. And we will step, very softly, toward the one place in all the castle that never truly slept, the kitchen. But gently. Everyone here is dreaming. Part 5. Bread, herrings, and the gong. While the hall sleeps, there is one place in the castle where the fires never quite go out. Come with me, quietly, across the dark yard, toward the low red glow and the smell of bread. This is the kitchen, and it is the busiest, hottest, most human place in all the stone. If the great hall was the castle's heart, the kitchen was its stomach, and a stomach never truly rests. So let us spend a gentle while here, among the ovens and the cauldrons, thinking about the oldest comfort there is, food, and the people who made it. In the larger castles, the kitchen stood a little apart, sometimes in its own building, and for a very sensible reason. It was full of open flame and roaring heat, and a stray spark could burn a whole castle down. Keeping the fire and the smoke and the noise at a distance protected the quiet rooms where people lived. So the kitchen sat slightly separate, glowing in the dark, a place of enormous fireplaces you could roast a whole animal in, and huge cauldrons of boiling water, and ovens that held their heat through the night. It was hot and loud, and it smelled of wood smoke and roasting meat, and to a cold, tired servant, it was probably the most welcoming place on earth. And the work that came out of it was staggering. At one castle, we know the name of the cook, a man called Isaac of the kitchen, and we know his burden. He had to feed up to 200 people, twice a day, every day. 200 mouths, morning and evening, from one kitchen, by hand. There were no shortcuts, no machines, only fire and knives and endless labor. When you imagine a medieval feast, do not only picture the Lord at his table, picture Isaac, somewhere behind it all, red-faced in the heat, keeping 200 people fed for yet another day. The unseen engine of the whole warm scene. And what came off those fires would astonish us. Alongside the beef and pork and mutton, the great tables were sometimes graced with swan, and peacock, and heron, and small roasted larks. These were not really about hunger, they were about show. To serve a peacock, its cooked body dressed again in its own shimmering feathers, was to tell every guest exactly how rich and powerful you were. The food was a language, a message written in rare and beautiful birds that said, without a single word being spoken, "Look at what I can command." But it was not feasting every day. The church set aside many days for fasting from meat, and on those days people ate fish instead, and they ate it in quantities that are hard to believe. At Isaac's castle, the kitchen worked through some 24,000 herrings in only 3 months. Most of it was salted and preserved, dull and hard, so a clever cook earned his keep by drowning it in strong, spiced sauces to make it worth eating. There was even a man whose whole job was the sauces. Long tables of salt fish, night after night, made bearable by a saucer's art. Even monotony, it turns out, can be a kind of comfort if someone loves you enough to make it taste of something. Nearly everyone, meanwhile, drank ale, from the lord down to the smallest child. Water was often unsafe, drawn from rivers and wells that were far from clean. So weak ale was simply what you drank, all day, at every meal. And beyond the hall lay a cluster of little rooms devoted to all this, with names that still echo faintly in our own homes. The pantry, from the old word for bread, where the loaves were kept. The buttery, where the ale and the candles were served out. The larder, built on the cold northern side of the castle, out of the sun, so that meat would keep a little longer. Whole small rooms, each dedicated to one kind of keeping. Our kitchens still remember their names. Here is a thrifty little secret of that kitchen. The fat that dripped from the roasting meat was never wasted. It was used again and again for cooking, and what was left over was often made into candles or saved for 100 small uses. It was so valued that the kitchen was sometimes locked at night to stop the servants from stealing a lump of it to eat or to make a light of their own. Think of that, a world where a handful of cooking fat was worth locking away, where the difference between darkness and a little light might be a stolen scrap of tallow. We turn a switch and forget. They locked the fat away like treasure. Now, gently, we must speak of the other end of all this eating, because the people of the castle had to answer nature's call somewhere. Their toilet was called the garderobe, and it was usually a simple wooden seat with a hole, set in a small chamber built into the thickness of the wall, so the waste dropped down a shaft and away, into the moat, or a pit, or simply the ground outside. And here is a strange and rather lovely detail hidden in the name. Garderobe means, more or less, to guard the robes. People sometimes hung their clothes in that little chamber, because the sharp ammonia smell was believed to keep the moths and fleas out of the wool. The toilet doubled as the wardrobe, a small, odd, practical tenderness, folded into the least romantic room in the castle. Someone, of course, had to keep all of this flowing, and it was the grimmest job of all. He was called the gong farmer, and his work was to climb down into the cesspits and clear away what had fallen there, load it into buckets, and carry it off to be buried or spread on the fields. It was foul work and dangerous, and so, quietly, it was often quite well paid. But the danger was real. We even know of one such man, called Richard the Raker, who in the year 1325 fell into a cesspit and drowned there. It is a terrible way to be remembered, and yet he is remembered, all these centuries later, by name. A poor man doing the worst work in the world, and history kept his name when it forgot 10,000 nights. And over all of it, ordering the whole long day, there was a sound. High in a tower, a bell. It rang to call the household to their meals, and it rang to mark the hours of prayer, and its plain voice reached into every corner of the castle, into the kitchen and the hall and the cold, empty rooms alike. It was the closest thing they had to a clock. When it rang, you knew where you were in the day and what came next. That same bell we listened for at the very beginning of the night is ringing now, softly, over the sleeping castle, marking an hour that no one is awake to count. Let it fade. The bread is rising, the fires are banked, and out beyond the kitchen, in the wider dark, the whole living world of the castle is waiting. The lords, the ladies, and the long road that led to their gate. Part 6. Lords, Ladies, and the Road. We have seen the stones raised and the fires lit and the tables laid. But a castle was never only a building. It was the center of a web, a knot that gathered up a whole stretch of countryside and held it in one hand. Tonight, in this gentle part, let us step back from the walls and look at the human world that spun around them. The lords, the ladies, the servants, and the long road that carried everyone in and out of the gate. Because a castle without its people was just an empty shell of stone. It was the coming and going that made it alive. At the root of it all was a system we call feudalism, and beneath the grand word lies a simple human bargain. The king could not rule every field himself, so he granted great stretches of land to his most powerful nobles. In return, those nobles owed him loyalty and soldiers and service when he called. And they in turn parceled out their lands to lesser lords below them on the very same terms. It was a great ladder of promises, reaching from the king at the top down to the peasant in the field, and the castle was the place where each rung of that ladder was made solid in stone. A promise you could live inside. A loyalty with a roof. But we should not pretend it was gentle. When the Normans came and planted their castles across England, they were building on top of people's lives, quite literally. To clear the ground for the castle at Lincoln, records suggest that 166 houses were pulled down. 166 homes, with families in them, swept away to make room for the walls of the new masters. The castle that looked so noble on its hill had a shadow at its foot, and in that shadow were the homes of the people who had been there first. It is worth holding both of those truths at once, the beauty of the thing and the cost of it. Once it stood, though, a castle gave its holder an extraordinary power over the land around it. From behind those walls, a lord could dominate the whole countryside for miles. He could ride out by day to enforce his will, to collect what was owed, to settle who was in the right, and then return each night to sleep safe behind closed gates. And the remarkable thing is how few men it took. A castle could be held by a surprisingly small garrison against a much larger force. That was its magic. It let a handful of people control a great many, not through numbers, but through the simple, patient strength of stone. One strong house, and the land for miles obeyed it. We tend to imagine the Lord riding off to war, and the castle standing quiet without him. But that quiet was often the lady's command. When the Lord was away, and he frequently was, it fell to his wife to hold the castle, to run its whole complex household, and, when it came to it, to defend it. History remembers women who did exactly this, who directed the stores and the servants and, in real sieges, the defense itself, refusing to yield the walls their husbands had left in their keeping. The soft word chatelaine, or the lady of the castle, hides a good deal of iron. When the fighting came, the castle did not always belong to a lord at all. Sometimes it belonged, entirely, to her. Out in the yard stood a small round building that told you, at a glance, how important the household was. It was the dovecote, a tower full of nesting holes for pigeons and doves, and it was a mark of real status, because the right to keep one was a privilege of the well-born. The birds gave fresh meat and eggs all through the year, even in the depths of winter when little else was to be had. To own a dovecote was to have a soft, cooing larder that fed itself, a quiet luxury murmuring away in the corner of the yard. Even the birds in a castle were a way of saying who you were. And a castle was rarely without a chapel, for faith ran through every hour of the day. There would be a place to pray, sometimes a small niche, sometimes a beautiful vaulted room of its own, where the household gathered, and the day was marked by prayer as much as by meals. In some castles, the chapel was built directly above the gate, so that everyone who entered passed beneath a blessing. Faith was not a thing set aside for one day a week. It was woven into the ordinary hours, into the rising and the eating and the sleeping, a quiet companion to the whole of life. The same bell that called them to dinner called them too to their prayers. The people who did the daily work of all this, the servants, were more numerous and better cared for than we might expect. The finest of them, the pages and the damsels, lived close to the lord and lady. Below them ranged a whole ordered world, down to the boy who turned the roasting spit and the gong farmer we met before. And they were given uniforms called liveries in their lord's own colors, so that to wear them was to belong, visibly, to a great house. Their days were long, and their pay was small, but there were regular meals, and a place, and an identity. To serve in a great castle was, for many, a sought-after life. There is a deep human comfort in belonging somewhere, in wearing the colors of a place that will feed you. Some households were so grand that the lord had, in effect, a castle within the castle. At one great fortress, the family's own tower held its own hall, its own kitchens, its own chapel and bedrooms and wine cellars, complete and self-contained, so that even if the rest of the castle fell, they could withdraw into this inner world and keep living, keep dining, keep holding on. A private fortress tucked inside the public one. It is the same instinct as the keep, followed all the way to its end. A safe place, inside a safe place, inside a safe place. We are always, all of us, building one more room to be safe in. And every soul we have spoken of, the lord and the lady, the pages and the priest, the messengers with news and the merchants with goods, all of them came and went by a single path, the road that climbed to the gate. All day it carried life up to the castle and back down again into the world. And when night fell and the last traveler was in, the great chains groaned and the drawbridge rose and the road was closed until morning. Stand at the foot of it now, in the dark, and look up at the shape of the walls against the stars, with one small window lit high above. The road is empty, the gate is shut. Everyone who was ever going to arrive today has arrived. And somewhere out beyond that quiet road, in the cold, the thing every castle was truly built to face is beginning, at last, to gather. Not yet. Sleep first. But it is coming. Part 7. When the gate held. Now we come to the thing the castle was built for, the siege. But do not brace yourself for horror. We are going to walk through this as gently as everything else, from a great distance of years, where the fear has long since drained away, and only the strange, patient cleverness of it remains. Because here is the secret that films never tell you. A siege was mostly not a battle at all. It was a waiting, a long, slow, quiet test of who could endure. And the castle, standing calm behind its walls, was built to endure almost anything. To understand why, you must understand that in this age, great open battles were rare and terrifying gambles. Everything could be lost in a single afternoon to bad luck or bad weather, so commanders avoided them. Instead, war became a matter of castles. Whoever held the strong places held the land. This is why a small garrison behind good walls was worth so much more than its numbers. A handful of defenders, well supplied, could tie down an army many times their size for months, simply by refusing to come out. The castle turned weakness into strength. It let the few outlast the many by doing nothing at all but staying inside. And so the true work of defense was done long before any enemy appeared. It was done in the storerooms. A castle preparing for a siege filled itself with everything that keeps people alive: grain, salted meat, dried fish, ale and wine in case the water should fail. Above all, it guarded its well, its deep shaft down to clean water, and its cisterns of stored rain, because a castle with water could outlast almost anyone. The real battle was fought in the granary and at the wellhead, in the quiet arithmetic of how many mouths for how many days. Victory was mostly a matter of patience, salted away in barrels before the trouble ever came. At the gate, the weakest point, they layered trick upon trick. There was the drawbridge, which could be raised to leave a gulf of empty air where the entrance had been, and behind it the portcullis, a great grid of iron-shod oak that dropped down from above to seal the passage in an instant. And if an enemy forced even that, he found himself trapped in the gate tunnel, beneath those murder holes in the ceiling. To take a castle by its gate, you had to beat a bridge, and a falling grid, and a trap in the roof, one after another, all while under fire. The door of a castle was not a door. It was a whole dark riddle, and most who tried to solve it did not. Now, let us gently set to rest one of the most famous images of all: the boiling oil poured from the battlements onto the attackers below. It is a wonderful scene, and it almost never happened. Oil was precious and costly, far too valuable to pour over a wall. What the defenders actually used was simpler and closer to hand: boiling water, or hot sand, which could work its way inside armor and burn horribly, or quicklime, and most often of all, plain water, not to harm anyone, but to put out the fires the attackers kept trying to start. The truth is humbler than the legend. It usually is. A bucket of hot water and a great deal of patience, rather than a cauldron of burning oil. And the very simplest defense of all was often the best. When attackers came swarming up their ladders against the wall, the defenders did not always need clever weapons. They simply used a long forked pole to push the ladders away from the wall and let them topple backward, men and all. There is something almost comic in it, and something very human. Amid all the engineering and the great machines, a good deal of defending a castle came down to a few determined people with sturdy poles, shoving ladders off the wall as fast as the enemy could raise them. Sometimes survival is not grand. Sometimes it is just refusing, over and over, to let the ladder stay. When they feared miners tunneling toward the walls, the defenders would dig too. They sank their own countermines, tunneling out to meet the enemy underground, so that battles were sometimes fought in the dark, deep beneath the castle, in narrow spaces lit by a single flame. or they would simply collapse the enemy's tunnel before it was finished. Think of it. The siege we imagine happening on the sunlit walls was sometimes really happening far below everyone's feet, in the black earth, in a silence broken only by the sound of digging drawing slowly closer. A hidden war beneath the visible one. But the cleverest defenses were not made of stone or iron at all. They were made of nerve. At one Welsh castle, the garrison was starving, down to its last few pigs, and about to fall. So the commander did something audacious. He had those last pigs killed and thrown over the walls at the besiegers, as if to say, "Look how much food we have. We are throwing it away." The trick worked. The attackers, convinced the castle was stocked for a long siege, gave up and went home, never knowing the defenders had been on the very edge of ruin. A bluff, flung over a wall, saved everyone inside. Sometimes the strongest thing in a castle is not the wall. It is a steady face over a pounding heart. For some places, this waiting and defending was not a rare event, but a way of life. One northern castle, standing on a hard and endlessly contested border, was besieged, over the long centuries, some 10 times. 10 times its people looked out at a gathering army, and set to filling the storerooms and manning the walls. 10 times they endured. Imagine living somewhere where the siege was almost a season, like winter, something that came again and again, and was simply survived, again and again. Not a single dramatic moment, but a long inheritance of patience, passed down through generations who all knew, in their bones, how to hold a gate. And that, in the end, is the deepest truth of the castle at war. Its greatest weapon was not the trebuchet or the boiling water or the falling portcullis. It was time. It was the ability to close the gate and wait and simply still be there when the enemy's food ran out, or their money ran dry, or their 40 days of service expired and their army melted away home. To hold a castle was, most often, to do almost nothing, magnificently, for a very long time. The gate held. The people inside slept in shifts and ate their careful rations and waited. But of course, the gate did not always hold. Sometimes the walls came down, and to understand how, we must go, at last, outside, to the strange and patient machines gathering in the dark. Gently, though, from very far away. There is nothing out there that can reach us now. Part 8. When the wall fell. We have stood inside the walls while they held. Now let us step outside, into the besiegers' camp, and see the strange machines and stranger tricks that could, now and then, bring a great castle down. But keep the blankets close. This is not a part to frighten you. These events happened lifetimes upon lifetimes ago, to people long at rest, and we look at them now the way you might look at old weather, with wonder, not fear. Come and see the cleverness of it, and then let it go. The greatest of the siege engines was the trebuchet, and it was a marvel of pure, patient physics. It did not use rope or muscle. It used weight, a huge counterweight. A great box of stone and earth was hauled up high on the short end of a long arm. When it was released, the weight fell, and the long arm swung up and over, hurling a stone of tremendous size across a great distance to crash against the walls. Where the trebuchet first came from is still argued over by historians to this day, its origins lost somewhere in the deep past. But its logic is beautifully simple. Let a great weight fall, and borrow its falling. A machine that threw mountains, powered by nothing but the patient pull of the earth itself. Yet even the trebuchet mostly worked slowly, and on the mind as much as the wall. The walls of a good castle were built to take that punishment, and a bombardment could go on for a very long time without breaking through. Its deeper effect was the sound of it, the endless, grinding crash of stone on stone, day after day, hour after hour, wearing down not the wall, but the spirit of the people behind it. Imagine trying to sleep to that, night after night. Sometimes the wall did not need to fall at all. Sometimes it was enough to make the people inside stop believing it would hold. When patience was not enough, attackers went not over the walls, but under them, and this was often the deadliest art of all. Miners dug a tunnel beneath a tower or a stretch of wall, propping the roof of their tunnel with wooden beams as they went. Then they packed the tunnel with brushwood and set it alight. When the props burned through, the tunnel collapsed, and the wall or tower above came crashing down into the hollow. At one famous English siege, the attackers brought down a corner of a great keep in exactly this way, and to fuel the fire beneath it, they used the fat of 40 pigs. 40 pigs, rendered down, to burn away the bones of a castle. The strange, homely detail of it stays with you. A tower, felled by the fat of the farmyard. But the strangest fall of all belonged to that castle we met earlier, the one Richard the Lionheart built in France, with its clever rounded towers. For all its brilliance, it fell, and it fell through the humblest opening imaginable. The attackers could not break the walls, but one soldier noticed that a latrine chute, a garderobe shaft, emptied out low on the wall near the chapel. He and a few others climbed up that filthy shaft, squeezed in through an unbarred window, and once inside, made such a noise that the defenders, thinking a whole force had broken in, fell back in a panic. The most advanced castle of its age was undone by a toilet. There is a strange, quiet humility in that. All that genius in stone, and the way in was the drain. Some sieges simply became endurance contests that passed into legend. At one great castle, the defenders held out against the king himself for 172 days, nearly 6 months. Trebuchets were tried and failed. Assaults were tried and failed. In the end, it was hunger that won, as it so often did. And when the garrison finally surrendered, they were said to have had only 2 days of food left. 2 days. Picture the arithmetic of that, counted out grain by grain, and how close the whole long agony came to ending the other way. They held for 170 days on the strength of will alone, and lost by the width of 2 more. And feeding an army through such a siege was its own vast labor, one that reached deep into the country around it. To supply the king's forces at that same long siege, whole regions were made to send food, and the accounts hold one wonderful, unexpected detail. The city of London sent a whale, an entire whale, hauled overland to help feed the besieging army. There is something almost dreamlike in the image. A great creature of the deep ocean, carried far inland, to feed soldiers camped around a landlocked castle. War gathers up the whole world into itself, even the whales, even the sea. Not every projectile hurled over a wall was meant to break stone. Some were meant to break the body. At one distant siege, far to the east, a besieging army was struck by a terrible plague, and in their cruelty, they loaded the bodies of their own dead onto their engines and flung them over the walls into the city, to spread the sickness within. It is grim, and we will not linger on it, but it is remembered because that sickness, historians believe, was carried from that place back across the sea and became the great plague we now call the Black Death. A single terrible act at a single siege, rippling outward into one of the largest sorrows in all of human history. We say it softly, and we move on. For most defenders, though, the end came not by machine or plague, but by the slow closing of an empty fist: starvation. When a castle was cut off and its stores ran low, the people inside faced terrible choices. First, they ate the last of the grain. Then, we are told, they ate the horses. And when the horses were gone, sometimes the dogs and the cats. A castle under siege slowly consumed its own living world, one animal at a time, until there was nothing left to eat and nothing left to do but open the gate. It is a hard truth, but a quiet one in the end. Most castles did not fall in fire and glory. They fell in hunger and in the simple, exhausting impossibility of one more day. And here is the mercy hidden inside all that patience. Time was on nobody's side for long. Besieging an enemy castle was ruinously expensive and dangerous and slow. Armies were often owed only a fixed term of service, commonly around 40 days, after which the soldiers had every right to simply go home. Disease crept through the crowded, filthy siege camps. Winter came. A relieving force might appear over the hill at any moment, so very often it was the attacker, not the defender, who broke first, who ran out of money or men or nerve, and withdrew, leaving the battered walls still standing. The gate, more often than not, outlasted the fist, and so the castle endured into quieter times, when the great sieges would end for a very different reason, not because the walls grew weak, but because the world, at last, moved on. Sleep now. The worst is behind us. Only the long, soft twilight of the castle remains. Part 9. The Long Quiet. Every age ends, and the age of castles ended slowly, so slowly that the people living through it may hardly have noticed. There was no single day when the last castle closed its gate. Instead, there was a long fading, a gentle loosening of the grip that stone had held on the world for centuries. Tonight, in this quiet part, we watch the castles let go, not with a crash, but with a sigh. This is the twilight of the story, and it is a peaceful one. Let your breathing slow to match it. The thing that undid them, in the end, was a gray powder and a puff of smoke. Gunpowder. For centuries, the great tall walls had been the perfect answer to every weapon the world could throw. But cannon changed the question entirely. A high stone wall, so strong against a battering ram, was simply a large target for a heavy iron ball, and where a trebuchet had bruised, a cannon could shatter. Very height that had meant safety now meant vulnerability. The walls did not fail because they were badly made. They failed because the world invented a new kind of question that old, beautiful answer could no longer meet. For a while, they tried to adapt. Faced with cannon, castle holders backed their old walls with great banks of packed earth, so the soft earth could swallow the shock of a cannonball that would have cracked bare stone. The tall, proud, vertical wall began to give way to something lower, thicker, hunched close to the ground. You can almost feel the character of the buildings changing, growing squatter and more cautious, as the age of the soaring tower quietly passed. The castle was learning to duck, and a thing that has learned to duck has already begun to stop being a castle. Then came the deliberate ending, a strange word for a strange act: slighting. After the Great Civil War in England, the victors set about purposely breaking castles, so they could never again be held against a government. And this was not random destruction. It was careful, and it was symbolic. More than 100 fortified places were slighted or marked for it. Often they would pull down just enough, break a wall here, topple a tower there, to make the castle useless, while leaving much of it strangely, mournfully standing. A ruin made on purpose, a great house deliberately wounded, so it could never be strong again, and then simply left there, half broken, in the rain. The breaking reached even the water. When one famous castle was slighted, they did not only pull at its walls, they drained its lake, let out the great sheet of water that had protected it, and mirrored its towers for centuries, until only mud and reeds remained where the moat had been. Imagine standing there as the water level slowly dropped, revealing the drowned foot of the walls, the old dark stone that no living person had ever seen. Something is very final about draining away the water. The castle's own reflection, gone. The mirror emptied. The long, quiet beginning. Here is a small mystery, though, tucked inside all this breaking. We tend to imagine castles being brought down by dramatic undermining, by tunnels and collapse. But when archaeologists looked carefully at the medieval castles known to have been destroyed, of 61 such sites, only 5 showed real signs of undermining. Only 5. The tunnel and collapse we picture so vividly was actually rare, and rarer still to find, because a successful mine erased its own evidence, burying itself as it worked. The great cinematic image turns out to be the exception. Most castles met their end in humbler, slower, more forgettable ways. History is quieter than legend, almost always. And now and then, out of the earth, the old violence surfaces again. In one English castle, in the 1930s, workers digging on the site broke into something unexpected. A tunnel, a siege mine, dug centuries before to bring the castle down, and then abandoned and forgotten and sealed in darkness ever since. Think of it, a tunnel dug in fear and fury by miners in the flickering dark, left unfinished, and then simply waiting, silent, under the grass, for 700 years, until a modern spade let the daylight in at last. The old wars do not entirely vanish. They only sleep, deeper down, under everything. Not every castle was broken, of course. Many simply changed their nature and softened. As the centuries of war gave way to centuries of peace, the castle became less a fortress and more a fine house. Great windows, which no sensible builder would ever have cut into a wall that might be attacked, began to open in the old defenses, letting in light and views where once there had only been arrow slits. The building relaxed. It stopped bracing for a blow that was no longer coming, and let itself, at last, become simply a home. The clenched fist of stone slowly opened into an open hand, and the very oldest castles, the earthen mounds where our whole story began, found gentle second lives no builder could have dreamed. Some of those ancient mottos still stand, and are still used, though for the softest of purposes now. At one great castle, the old mound holds an archive, a quiet store of precious documents. At another, the tower on the ancient motte became rooms for university students to live and sleep and study in. Where once a wooden fort watched over a conquered land, a young person now dozes over a book. The fierce old hills have become, in the end, places of paper and dreaming. There is no sweeter ending for a fortress than that. So the age of castles did not so much end as dissolve into houses and ruins and grassy mounds, into archives and student rooms, and quiet fields where children play. The walls stopped being needed, and so, slowly, they stopped being feared. and became instead simply part of the landscape, as familiar and unthreatening as a hill or a stand of old trees. The long quiet settled over all of it, the deep peace that comes when a thing no longer has any work to do but stand and weather and be looked at with wonder. And that peace is where we are going now, in the last part of our long night. Not to war and not to ending, but to what remains, to the stones that are still with us, and to the astonishing ways we are learning, even now, to hear what they remember. Part 10. What the Stones Remember. Here we are, at the last part of our long night. Everything is quieter now. The wars are over, the builders long gone, the great households scattered into the dark backward of time. What remains is the stone itself, standing patient in the fields and on the headlands, and the strange, tender science of learning to listen to it. This final part is not about how castles lived or died. It is about how they endure and what they can still tell us, if we are gentle and if we are quiet enough to hear. Some castles never fell into ruin at all, but stand almost whole, holding the centuries inside them. Far away in Syria, the great Crusader castle of Crac des Chevaliers still rises from its hill, its double rings of wall so finely made that it has been called one of the most perfect castles ever built. It once held a garrison of some 2,000 men. To stand before it is to see, almost untouched, the very idea we have been following all night, made real and vast and enduring. A dream of safety, dreamed in stone, that the centuries somehow forgot to take back. And in the flat lands of Poland stands the largest of them all, a castle called Malbork, built of brick rather than gray stone, glowing warm and red. It covers some 50 acres, 4 times the size of even mighty Windsor, room upon room, court within court, wall behind wall, a whole city of brick raised by an order of warrior monks. It is almost too big to feel like a castle at all. It feels like a world, and yet it began, like every castle, with a single unit laid patiently in place. Not a stone this time, but a brick. One small red brick, and then another, and then a million more. Some castles, of course, never stopped being homes. In England, Windsor Castle has been lived in one form or another, for very nearly 1,000 years, which makes it the largest inhabited castle in the world. Think of that unbroken thread, from a wooden fort on a chalk hill to the vast stone palace of today. There has almost always been someone there, sleeping behind those walls, night after night, century after century. A fire kept burning, in some sense for 1,000 years, a home that simply never, ever emptied. But most castles are ruins now, and the ruins have not fallen silent. They have only changed who lives in them. Where knights once watched from the walls, now jackdaws and ravens nest in the empty windows. Where the great hall stood, grass grows, and wildflowers push up between the fallen stones. Ivy climbs the towers, owls roost in the keep. The castle, which was built to keep the wild world out, has in the end gently welcomed it in. And there is something deeply peaceful in that surrender. The fortress, at last at rest, become a home for birds. And here is where the wonder of our own age begins. For we have learned to find castles that were completely lost. Using a technology called LiDAR, which sweeps a landscape with countless pulses of light from the air, researchers can strip away the trees in their images and see the bare shape of the ground beneath. And there, under centuries of forest, hidden from every walking eye, the buried outlines of forgotten castles have appeared. Whole fortresses, lost for hundreds of years, found again not by digging, but by light. The land has been quietly keeping them all this time, and we are only now learning how to see. We can look beneath the ground too, without ever breaking it. With radar that reads the earth, archaeologists have walked across the empty courtyards of castles and mapped what lies hidden below the grass. At one castle, this quiet scanning revealed the buried foundations of a great tower and a lost chapel, structures no one had seen for centuries, their outlines glowing on a screen. The past is not always gone. Sometimes it is only sleeping just beneath our feet, waiting for a gentler way of knocking. And now, at last, we have one. Perhaps the strangest listening of all is done in the old toilets. When archaeologists excavate the deep pits beneath the garderobes, they find, preserved in that dark, the leavings of ordinary meals, seeds and bones and fragments that tell us, with astonishing intimacy, what these people actually ate. Not what the chronicles boasted of, but the true daily bread of a household. The humblest, most private place in the whole castle turns out to hold the most honest history of all. The grand halls kept their secrets. The cesspit kept the truth. And through it all, in the stone itself, those small carved marks endure. The mason's marks, the private signs left by the men who cut the blocks. We spoke of them near the start of the night, when the castle was still rising. Now we meet them again at the end, weathered but still legible after 800 years. A person who could not write and left no other trace on the earth is known to us still by that one small shape, cut into stone. It is the closest thing to a signature, to a voice, to an "I was here," that most of these people ever left behind. And it is enough. It is, somehow, enough. So think, one last time, of that single stone we have followed all through the night. It was cut from a hillside by a person now nameless. It was marked and lifted and set into a wall, and it has stood there, through siege and slighting and 1,000 quiet years, ever since. It has been rained on and snowed on and warmed by 10,000 mornings. It is a little softer at its edges now, a little rounder, worn gentle by time. But it is still there, exactly where those long-gone hands placed it. And high above it, in a niche in the wall, a candle is still burning in a window, throwing its small warm light out over an empty road, where once the whole world came and went. Rest now. We have arrived. Our journey is nearly done. We have walked a very long way tonight, from the first mounds of raw earth to the perfect walls, to the fires in the hall, to the strange machines in the dark, and out again into the quiet fields where the ruins dream. And through all of it, we followed one stone. Do you remember it? Cut from a hillside, lifted into a wall, weathered soft by the centuries. It is still there. It will be there long after this night is forgotten. Listen now, one last time, for our two small sounds. The great chains of the drawbridge are still. They will not groan again tonight. And high in the chapel tower, a single bell rings once, softly, marking an hour no one is awake to count. Then it, too, falls silent. You are part of this long story, you know, the same as the mason and the cook and the lady who held the walls. You lay down your head at the end of a day, in a safe place, exactly as they did. The castle was only ever a wish made out of stone, the wish to be warm and held and safe until morning. Tonight, that wish is yours. The candle in the window is burning low. The road is dark and empty. The stone is waiting, patient where it has always been. Sleep